The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Please consult your tax advisor, even if it's us, to find out how this may apply to your specific situation.
Hey listeners, and welcome to Tax Trails. On today's episode, we're going to be interviewing a partner at our firm, Carl Jensen, CPA. Here's your hosts, Derek and Spencer.
Thanks, Chandler.
Thank you.
Carl, welcome to the podcast.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
We're really glad to have you here. So how about you start off by just giving us a little background on yourself, where you went to school, where your professional career has gone, and why you're in tax and stuff like that.
Sure. So I am Utah through and through. Grew up in Sandy. You know, you could see the tram at Snowbird from my backyard.
Okay.
And grew up in the mountains and played a lot of golf and tennis and all that stuff, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of funny. I went to Skyline.
Got it.
But I was in Hillcrest boundaries.
Okay.
And that was because of overcrowding and
Yeah.
whatnot. But my whole goal when I was a kid is I wanted to play golf at Utah.
Okay.
And coming out of high school, I won the 5A at the time, back a million years ago. That was the highest classification. I won the individual title for golf.
Okay.
And the head coach at the time was going to have me and my teammate play off for the last spot
Ooh.
on Utah's team.
Dang.
That's
And
rough.
I said, I don't think I'm up for that. And I ended up going to Utah Valley. But, Spencer, not when you were there. It was UVSC when I was there.
I see.
So still JUCO, had a mission to Costa Rica in between my freshman and sophomore years, but after that sophomore year, I got a phone call from the coach and was able to go pick up my University of Utah golf bag. And
That's awesome.
It was
Wow.
the greatest thing ever, and
That's super cool.
it was really fun. Had a great experience at both schools. I have friends for life at both schools. One of my teammates at Utah is now the head coach up at Utah.
Oh, cool.
So it's fun to stay in contact and whatnot. And so, so I did that, and then, graduated from Utah, and I was fully intending on doing the MAC program up there.
Mm-hmm.
And right around when all that stuff was going to come down, my wife and I got a little surprise that she was pregnant.
Awesome.
Which was a great blessing. And, but I knew I needed to work full time, and so that wasn't going to work for us. So I ended up going to University of Phoenix and got an MBA there so I could sit for the exam. Not something I divulge a lot because it's not.
You're Utah through and through.
It's not the most prestigious university.
Sure.
But I knew it was just a means to an end.
Right.
In that I already had my job in place,
Yeah.
and everything, and so I wasn't really I didn't have real aspirations to go big four, big five, whatever. I knew I was going to go work for my dad and his partners, and so I just get me to where I can sit for the exam, and that's all I want.
It's like
That's all
checking
I
a
need.
box.
Exactly.
Yep, that makes sense.
So, it was great. I did it with, I got my MBA with one of my really good friends from high school and college. And so we did it together. We were working together. He's actually at a competing firm now. He's a good dude. So that's my background. My calling card, the thing that I bring up with my schooling was, I was an academic All-American.
Nice.
With golf, which brings in an aspect of GPA, class, all that stuff, and then it also amount of rounds, scoring average on a national level. So it's both, it's athletics plus
academics,
And
Well done.
yeah, so
Good job, Carl.
hey, pat myself on the back.
Yeah. So you got your MBA, you're working full time, you got your CPA, and you're working. So where did you start your professional career at then? So is your father's firm?
Yes, I started. I would say my professional career started when I was about 8 years old. When I started
Okay.
cleaning the office, it was on 45th South and what was it like 5th East, something like that.
Okay.
And me and my sisters would go clean the office and fight like cats and dogs to get it done. And then when I was about 16, I started to help out with parts inventories at automotive dealerships,
Okay.
and doing that, and then little things. And then once I got into the later tail ends of school, my dad's like, "Hey, let's get you in and start working." And so that's when I started to do bookkeeping, taxes, things like that in '04. So it's been a good 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years plus if you count the smaller things.
Sure.
Another thing that I always joke about, I had my very first job interview about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
It literally was the first time I've ever gone into a job interview, and it was to become the head coach at Skyridge High School for their golf team.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of on the side, right? Because at the time, I had 2 boys that were on the team. I ended up not getting it, which one job interview and I don't get it, that's not very good percentages.
Yeah.
So I started working for my dad. I knew I always wanted to work for my dad. It kind of runs in the family. My great-grandfather started a department store in Manti, Utah. And I can remember him walking in and sitting on his green chair and taking off his fedora and putting it on the coat rack, and him watching his son run the store. And, and it got to the point my dad's like, okay, there's the store, which is a great store, great little store on Main Street. But we've got 3 brothers, and this thing can't support all of us. But he had the intention of going and getting an accounting degree to help further the store.
Oh, got
which
it.
was the intent.
Your father did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was going to go back, and at least that's my understanding. But then he kind of looking at it, he's like, yeah, this isn't really going to work. And so he ended up staying up here. And
Doing the public accounting thing.
right.
So you started working with him.
Yes.
And then tell us, so now you're at Larson.
I am at Larson.
How'd you
and
guys-
I'm happy to be here.
How did you guys end up here?
So, my father, he was at a different accounting firm, and he had given notice because he was helping government assistance programs to American Indians, and he would go out and audit on the res for 10 days, and then he'd be home for 3, gone for 10, home for 3.
Wow.
Which was, a daunting task. If I think about doing that right now, and oh my
sounds
gosh,
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's rough. The stories are great.
The experiences.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But he's like, I can't keep doing this anymore. I want to stay married to my wife. I love my family. So like his grandfather, he's like, I'm going to just go out on my own. And he had given notice to that firm. I can't remember the name of it. And he happened to have a meeting like the next day with a very, very small CPA or a very, very small tax client. And he brought his nephew in, and his nephew had just bought a business. And so they're sitting there talking and whatnot. My dad jokes around. This was back in the day when the drink cart would come around at about 3 o'clock. He said his boss might have had a little bit too much at the time because they had kind of a lengthy conversation, and come to the end of it, my dad's boss at the time was like, you know what? It was about a car dealership. The gentleman had bought a car dealership, and he said, all car salesmen are crooks and thieves.
He said this to the client.
To the client's nephew, right?
Who just bought the car.
Who just bought the car dealership. He's like, all car salesmen are crooks and thieves. Don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. And he turned, so this gentleman that had just bought the dealership turned to my dad and said, "Hey, you said you've given notice and you're, going out on your own." It's like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "Well, if you show up at the dealership on Monday, I'll keep you busy." And that was my dad's introduction to Larry Miller.
Oh, got it.
Wow.
And so he was Larry's outside CPA for, it had to have been close to 35 years. Which is just an amazing story. What's really fun is if you've heard of the book Driven, that's kind of it's about Larry's story. It was really fun when that came out because I read it and I would talk to my dad about it, and then he'd give me all the backstories about
Oh,
Stuff that wasn't in the
yes,
book.
this part wasn't in the book or the pictures of it. Yeah, I'm not in the picture, but I was on the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just being able to be around that was really, really, really great. And we can talk more about some dealership specific stuff later. But so my dad, obviously, looking back at it with where the Millers are now, they grew and grew and grew and grew. And that firm that my dad started grew with them, but it just got to the point to where independence was an issue. Financial institutions would go to Larry and say,
You got to have a more sophisticated team or larger team, essentially, more resources.
Well, the term that they used was you need a firm with a bigger liability policy.
Yeah.
And Larry would look at him and say, "No, I don't."
Right.
And the financial institution would turn around and say, "Yeah, you're right. That sounds great."
And that lasted for a long time.
Yes, it did.
But eventually.
And after Larry passed, when that second generation comes in, that you don't have that same amount of sway with it. But that firm, Jensen and Keddington, there were a lot of different iterations of the name, but that firm we could not keep up with the Millers, with their growth. And so it was getting to the point where, okay, Millers need to go to a bigger firm. My dad and his partners were it was getting tense.
Yeah.
Say it politely. And we helped facilitate a move from us to KPMG. And KPMG really pushed my father and myself to go with them. But they didn't want us to bring any of our clients with us. Just
Interesting.
Just go with the Millers.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Got it.
And my dad if you know me, if you know my father, our clients, most of our clients, we would consider friends because that's just how we are. And he could not just say, "You know what? Bye. I'm not going to deal with you anymore." Couldn't do it. Didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Financially, probably would have been a really smart move. But that's just not how my dad operates. And so from that point, I had a lot of trepidation of joining up with anybody. I'm not going to go into those stories, but there were issues between my dad and his partners and
Got it.
some nefarious things that went on the back end of that. And so we just went it alone, and we were little. Jensen and Associates, we went around when all that went down. We went and talked with a whole bunch of different firms, and one of those firms we went in and talked with. We went and talked with Mr. Larson, and it was so different than any other conversation that we had. And it was in the, in the old Sandy building.
Okay.
You guys were any of you guys there at the Sandy building?
I never officially worked there. I attended a staff meeting there in the December before we officially joined the firm in January.
Got it. Well, and actually, your dad was at one point worked for my dad.
Yes.
Which is
kind
of fun.
That's really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff Jensen gave my dad his first public accounting job, basically. So,
Right. Really liked him.
He worked for him for like a year, and then my dad kind of went and did his own thing, basically.
Right.
So,
Which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great. But anyway, so we met with Mr. Larson, and it was great. And the intent was you can office share. That way we can get some economies of scale. It helped us with our fees with like ultra tax and
okay.
And
so you guys came in
It was for the 2011 filing season.
Okay, in 2011, and you shared you rented office space, and then shared some licensing fees or whatnot with software costs and stuff.
Yeah.
With Larson, but you weren't really.
We were not.
You were still Jensen and Associates,
Correct,
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So-
And we didn't have the liability policy to do any attest work was astronomical.
Okay.
And so us, Larson, however you want to say it now, rented essentially our attest clients. So any review, audit, whatever,
got it.
They would perform the work. They would, release the letters and findings and everything. And we kind of worked out a deal with that. And so that went on for 11 years, I think it was. And I was walking down the hall one day, and Craig's like, "Has it been long enough?" I'm like, "Yeah, it probably has." And so
slowly starting to.
Yeah, the courtship had been sufficient.
Yeah.
And it's just it's really interesting to me when we go in, and you guys know this. For you listeners, we go into staff meeting, and it's always talking about the culture and the vision and all those key words, to try and get everybody to feel and set an expectation for how the company wants to be run. And I say that wants to be run because in a lot of companies that's how it is. But having gone around and talked with all these different CPA firms from the very first minute that we had conversations with Larson, I knew it was different. And so going into staff meeting and, we're a family, we're not for sale, all those things, It's not just talk. And I love that. And we probably would have joined a lot sooner had I not had so much PTSD from having other partners.
Yeah.
And
so then you eventually joined. Well, I guess it's been like a little less than 2 years ago.
It'll be
Basically
2 years in January.
Yeah, 2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you've been here at Larson since.
Yeah, and you haven't kicked me out yet, so that's great. That's great.
Awesome. We're glad that you're here with us now, Carl. So.
That's a great story. I didn't.
That's a good story. Yep, and we're glad that it led you to here.
Yeah,
so.
It's. I'm happy. I am very, very happy. It's been great. It's nice to not be when you don't. I can't speak English. Sorry. When we were Jensen and Associates, we were 5-6 people, and so I was HR, IT, backup admin. And so when we go to file extensions or even just file returns, we had our admin, which were a couple different people over the years, but that's a lot of weight to bury, or a burden to carry, I should say.
Yeah, on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so now, our admin staff here is so awesome, and I tell them all the time how wonderful they are. Having you guys with all your knowledge, it's a different realm, and I am so grateful. So, sorry, you guys are awesome.
Awesome, thanks.
Well, thanks. Well, awesome. Yeah, and it sounds like from just like listening, you've done a lot into the automotive space.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I would, it might be safe to say that's kind of like the niche that you and your father are in.
For sure.
What do you think, and we're kind of going now into like the topic of this episode, is kind of more centered around the automotive industry. What do you think is the biggest pain points in the automotive industry? And talking before, you kind of talked about a little bit about parts inventory that you started doing as a kid. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, the automotive industry is really it's one of a kind in my eye, because when you look at a dealership is really a whole bunch of businesses wrapped up into one.
Okay.
You could almost say it's like a dog grooming business, right?
Oh.
Interesting. Okay. Elaborate.
Well, so, in a dog grooming business, you got the haircuts, you've got the shampoos, you've got the, all the different things.
Yeah.
Okay?
I
So
got
driving around.
Right, different aspects of it. In the automotive industry, you've got new car sales, used car sales, parts, service, Sometimes they'll have a body shop.
Got it.
And then on the other side of it, you have most of them own their real estate. They own their building.
Interesting.
And so and all of those divisions operate independent of each other. So if you bring a car in for service and you have the service manager that writes up the ticket, then that gets taken to the tech, and the tech starts working on the car. They go to the parts department and essentially purchase the parts to work on service. And so there's an internal profit.
Yeah, like an intercompany kind of a thing.
For sure. And so when you look at an auto dealer financial statement, and Derek, I know I don't know if you've been able to look at any of those, Spencer. They're very, very complex. The first page will be the balance sheet, second page will be the profit and loss, and then behind it has all the detail of all those different departments, and they can be very difficult to read. And another thing that's really interesting within the auto industry, from my experience, very rarely do you have someone from the outside, a non-car person, jump into the car world and, kind of run with it.
Got it.
Most people that end up in, say, for example, the accounting department, they'll start out as a receptionist, then they'll be a cashier, then maybe they'll become a payroll clerk.
Got it.
They kind of go up the ranks, and it's just sometimes in all the different areas of a dealership, people can become very task oriented and not focus on the big part of things. The big picture of how it works. And so one of those things, yes, is parts inventory, and that's something that we do a fair amount of. And sometimes it gives us the opportunity to help out a dealership that is in dire straits. Sometimes it's just a year-end checklist thing that they want to make sure is good. Excuse me. But it's really important. So the key factors in doing a parts inventory are, number one, you have to have a clean cutoff. So a lot of the times we'll want to do it. Some people are very specific and want it done on January 1st.
Right.
That's a little bit of an antiquated way, because with the accounting services that are offered now, that isn't as essential, but it is good to have it at the end of a month, or as close to an end of a month as you can. Because when I refer to cutoff, that's more in the accounting side of things. Because what you're doing with a parts inventory is you're reconciling the parts program to the accounting department that goes onto the financial statement.
Got it.
They're within the same system, but they're not the same. They're operated separately.
Okay.
And so what we do is we'll get in with the accounting department and make sure that there is a clean cutoff, meaning we have received this, we have these invoices, everything's been posted, and then after this date, none of that is going to be posted. Let's separate it off. If we have those parts, on site, we're not counting them.
We're not going to receive them into our inventory
Correct.
yet.
Correct. Yeah. And because, if you say you got a couple engines, that could be a huge discrepancy.
Right.
If you don't get that clean cutoff. And then there's the physical act of counting a parts department. And if you think of like a metal shelf, right, that has like 10 different shelves on it.
Okay.
That would be considered a bin.
Got it.
And so all parts should be separated by bin. So you'll have bin A, and then shelf 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Got it.
They do it all sorts of different ways.
Yeah,
But then you'll get a sheet, and it'll have the part numbers that are supposed to be in that bin, and they'll be segregated by shelf. And we want to make sure that when they go in and count, you count from the bin to the sheet. Sometimes people, when they perform these inventories, they'll have the quantities that are on hand, And the people will look up there and like, oh yeah, that part number's right there. Yeah, I see it. There's kind of 3 of them. Okay, let's go.
It's not as accurate.
I see.
for
Instead of
sure.
saying
Yeah.
I've got 5 screws,
Widgets, yeah.
whatever, and then I go, I got 5 of those, and then I go to my sheet and I write down 5,
Correct.
regardless of what was there on the
What's
sheet.
on the sheet? Yeah.
And then you look at the sheet and it's like, oh, I'm supposed to have 7, but I've got 5. Okay, well, there's a discrepancy. Noted.
Right.
On
Right.
to the next or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I like to, when I go and help perform them, I do not want quantities on the sheet. I want to know.
You say, don't even tell me that. I just want to know that what part I'm looking for in this bin, and then
I really don't even care what's in the computer at the time,
Right.
because I want to know what's in the bin. So count from the bin, top to bottom, left to right, pull it off the shelf. The part numbers are crazy. They're like 20 different, alphanumeric,
Yeah.
and it can be really cumbersome. Heaven forbid you have to do one of the high volume drawers that have the screws and the gaskets and
Washer.
Yeah.
I mean, it just take forever. But count from the bin to the sheet, and then we go through. Once that count is done, we used to perform a double count to where you'd have. So it's always in 2-person count teams. One person is counting the shelf, the other person's writing it down. We'd have that count come in. Once that count was done, we'd have a different count team go count. Then we would compare the two, and if there was a difference, we'd send a third count team to go look at it. Now the accounting software is sufficient to where we don't do the double count, but when that count comes in, we make sure it's right, make sure it's legible, all those things, and we post it, and then we'll have the accounting department, whoever, or parts department, whoever had posted it, they'll run a couple different reports for us. So we'll do a dollar variance, and anything, this one's up to the discretion of either the parts manager or the owner or whatever. We're going to look any discrepancy over $100, any discrepancy over $50.
set your limit, whatever it is.
Correct. And then we'll go look at those, and then we'll also do a unit variance. And we'll kind of look at the unit variance coupled with the dollar variance and kind of set limits on that. Some look at every single one. Some, like, I don't care if it's $100 or less, I'm not going to deal with that. So you really, even with doing a single count, when you do those variance reports and check those, you're really touching it. A lot of things you're touching twice.
Got it.
Some you're touching 3 times. And so once that count is done, then you have a number that you're very confident with on what is on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to go back and do a reconciliation from that number to the general ledger. And that's where you'll get, the automotive industry has some, we've got some words. You've got cores. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. A core of a part is like a battery. So a battery, they'll get credit when they send dirty batteries back, or a dirty core is a part that has a base that is still able to be used.
Just needs to be refinished.
Exactly.
Essentially. Got it.
Exactly. So you've got how many dirty cores have you returned that you haven't gotten credit for? That's part of the reconciliation.
Interesting.
And so and then you've got work in process. How much has the service department pulled out of inventory and is in work in process? So it's still here, and it's depending on how they do their accounting, is it still included in the inventory because we haven't
officially
finished the RO. The RO hasn't been closed, so those items are still part of the inventory on the accounting side. So there's, and then there's credits and things that are owed back and all of those things. So you got to go through all those reconciling items. And going back to where I started, if you don't have a good cutoff, you're just spinning your wheels and trying to get to that exact number. Long story short, you go through that process. You draw a line in the sand. We're going to do the inventory on this date. This is our cutoff. And I'll give you an example why. And I don't have the name of the dealership, but I can tell you this because it was in the news, and
Public knowledge already.
Yes, public knowledge. There was a dealer that came to one of the previous iterations of Jensen and said, my dealership is being taken and I've lost my right to be a dealer, and they've given me X amount of money, and I want you to find out why. And they gave us the financial statement. We looked at it, and my dad, I wasn't a part of this, but I've heard the story many times. My dad and one of his partners looked at the financial statement, and within 30 seconds, they knew exactly where it was. And they were in the guy's office, and it said his parts department had $600,000-$700,000 in parts inventory. And there's no way he had more than $300,000.
Got it.
And he's like, well, no, we have this big pile of parts. Side comment. When you do a parts inventory, people that do them often know you cannot, if a part is in a package, you leave it in the package, because if it's out of the package, if the package is open, you can't return it, which is a big deal. So anyway, going back to the story, he's like, I've got this pile of parts, and none of them are in boxes, none of them are in packages. He's like, that's worth like $350,000. And my dad looked at him and says, that pile of parts isn't worth $1, let alone that amount, because it was just all open, some of it had been used,
Yeah.
Maybe you could get 10 cents on the dollar, maybe, if you sold it on eBay or whatnot. What had been happening is the dealer, if they hit certain marks, then with some of the manufacturers, they'll get trips, they'll get,
So they were buying extra.
Well, no. What was happening is when they weren't going to hit the benchmarks to get the presidential trip, to go to Cabo or whatever, Europe, the office manager, who happened to be a nephew or something like that, he would debit parts inventory and credit revenue, and just kept doing that over and over and over and over.
Oh, I see. As in,
so just
milestones within the company of selling.
Correct.
Oh, so he was like selling.
He was just inflating revenue so that those benchmarks could be made, and so the dealer could receive the presidential trip. And this would have all been buttoned up and understood had
they had an inventory done
correctly.
Yeah.
Correctly. So, there's some things that if there's collusion and whatnot, obviously that's going to be tough. But most issues within the parts department, if you do once a year, you don't have to do it all the time. They'll do their perpetual inventories and throughout the year and bin checks and whatnot, which make it to where they have a handle on it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they feel like that's adequate.
Got it.
I disagree with that.
Yeah.
Do a once a year full on, count the whole thing, do it correctly, because you'll never know until you know.
Yeah. I guess if you're keeping it clean and tidy and doing a perpetual inventory, it'll make that annual inventory more painless.
Correct.
But that's still a requirement, something that should be done. But are you saying it's not something that's actually required by the manufacturers necessarily?
No.
So it's not something that they're required to do, and unless they're getting an audit for some reason, right? Then maybe they would do it there, but that's not really a requirement from the manufacturers either, right? So,
no, the manufacturers they really don't have a lot of requirements as far as the test work or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the audits that happen for any requirement, the flooring company, like the bank, dealerships don't own their cars for the most part. They have a loan with the bank. It's called a flooring line, and that's how they get the vehicles. So a new car, when you're buying a new car, it's not owned by the dealership. It's
owned by the
technically
bank.
Owned by the bank. Correct.
Got it. Yeah.
And sometimes some dealerships own their used cars, and so that can be a different deal.
Got it.
But there'll be a flooring line check almost monthly by the financial institutions, but not really nothing from the manufacturer, especially in the parts area, and unless it starts to look really out of whack.
Got it.
Then they might get involved. But that would more come from any requirement for a review or an audit or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's where you more get the requirement to have it done. But if it was me, if I owned a car dealership, I would definitely have one once a year for sure.
Awesome.
Wow. And you do them, right?
Yeah. We do them for a bunch of different dealerships. Is it like the most fun work on the planet? No, it's long, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity to be around the department, to be around the people that work there, which is the whole reason that I do what I do anyway. If I had to, just be form filler out all the time and not have interactions with the clients, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so being able to get out, talk with them, that's more what I like about the profession for sure.
Awesome.
Wow. A lot of good insight.
Yeah. Anything else that you think is valuable insight on dealerships and automotive industry? Or, I mean, that was a pretty good rundown of a topic there. So
it's really fun. I really enjoy being, having that niche and working in it, because it's so, dealerships are just their own beast, and folks that own dealerships, they're go-getters. They bet on themselves. They work really, really hard, and the people within the dealerships, if they've got a really good team, they're fun to be around. And it's just a fun industry to help them build and grow and expand. Or if it's in a down economy, when the down economy happens, it's rewarding to help them tighten things up and make sure that all those precautions, like a parts inventory, even though it's an extra expense, you're not letting things slip out that shouldn't, but yeah, it's
awesome.
It's been fun.
And to be clear, I mean, that's not the only industry you work in though either, right? I mean, you're a general tax guy as well, right? So you can help out anybody in whatever industry they work in.
It's really entertaining sometimes when I take a step back and I look at the things that the types of companies that I'm working on at any given time. It's a law firm, a dealership, a therapist.
Sure. Yeah. Construction.
Yeah,
real
salon,
real estate,
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's. But again, we have a custom ring company. There are so many different industries, and it keeps us on our toes, because all we really do, there's puzzle pieces that are laid in front of us, and we gotta fix the puzzle. We gotta put the puzzle together.
Absolutely.
And doing that for people that are, again, hard workers, honest.
Yeah.
That's what makes it
rewarding.
Fun. Yes, it's very rewarding. Agreed.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I feel, important.
Yeah.
Great.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl.
You bet.
And thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate it.
Yep. See you in the next one.
For more information about Larson & Company and other educational material, you can find us at our website, larsco.com, also linked in the show description. For questions or suggestions on future episodes, you can contact us at larsonpod@larsco.com. If you would like to learn more about today's episode topic, additional resources can be found in the episode description.